Greetings and welcome to the Introduction to Astronomy. In this week's exploration of the solar system, we will talk about the Dawn spacecraft and look at its exploration of the asteroid belt. So let's go ahead and get started. So the Dawn spacecraft was launched on September 27th of 2007, and it visited two asteroids, or one asteroid and one dwarf planet. So Vesta being the first, and we can see its orbit here. It arrived at Vesta in 2011, which is shown over here, but it took a roundabout way to get there, being launched in September and then passing by Mars for a gravity assist before reaching Vesta. So we use another planet as a way to get a little more energy and pick up the speed and to change the orbit as it gets there. So what was the purpose of this? Well, the purpose was to study a couple of large asteroid belt objects, and that was Vesta and Ceres, the dwarf planet in the asteroid belt. This will help us to better understand solar system formation because some of these objects are the building blocks of the planets. It was also a test of using ion engines for propulsion heading out into the outer solar system, which was actually quite successful. Now, so we looked at Vesta first, and let's take a look at an image of Vesta here. So here is an image of Vesta as seen by the Dawn spacecraft, and it was interesting in that we found that it had a very metal-rich core, unusual for an asteroid, and that it had possibilities of water flow, something that we would not expect on an asteroid. Now, asteroids are generally dry, airless objects and don't have a sufficient mass to be able to hold any kind of atmosphere, and that would include an object like Vesta. But we're learning that there's a lot more to the solar system than we began to understand earlier on. So Vesta we see here, relatively heavily cratered, but with some interesting history to it. And then after about a year, so in 2012, after about a year of orbiting Vesta, the Dawn spacecraft left orbit there and headed towards Ceres to explore that dwarf planet. And we see an image of Ceres from the Dawn craft here as it approached. And again, very heavily cratered object, but also unusual. We see the bright white, which was actually visible as the craft headed towards Ceres. And that was found later believed to be salt deposits that were dug up from the interior during impacts. And we can see how they're around some of the major craters there. It also has evidence of cryovolcanism. Now, that just means ice volcanoes. So when we get to the outer solar system, ice behaves much as rock does in the inner solar system. And it can be heated up, and then it can erupt outward in a volcanic activity very similar to what we see here on Earth with rock. But at the much colder temperatures, ice plays that role. Now, it orbited Ceres for a couple of years, and finally mission ending on October 31st of 2017 because of a loss of propellant. And what that means is, no, the craft wasn't going to be going anywhere, but you still needed propellant to keep it pointing in the correct direction. So had to keep the antenna pointed toward Earth. Once the propellant was gone, that was no longer possible, and the mission ended. But the Dawn craft is likely still there in orbit, may eventually decay and crash into the surface, but it is probably currently still in orbit around Ceres. We just can no longer communicate with it. So let's go ahead and finish up here with our summary. And what we looked at today was the Dawn spacecraft launched to study two large asteroids, or two large objects in the asteroid belt. And it orbited both Vesta and Ceres, mapping their surfaces, and gave us a better understanding of these objects and the early history of the solar system. So that concludes this week's exploration of the solar system video on the Dawn spacecraft. We'll be back again next week for another exploration of the solar system video. So until then, have a great day, everyone, and I will see you in class.